Hi, everybody. Thank you for waiting. Great to see so many of you here. My name is Victoria, or Vica, also known as, although on Leland I'm Victoria. And this is Stone.
Hi, I'm Stone.
We are both coaches on Leland, and we're also actually besties. We both live in London. We went to school together at Stanford, getting our MBAs. And yeah, we're just really excited to get together and talk you guys through your interview strategy. Hopefully, most of you have interviews already being scheduled, or maybe you're still waiting on results, or maybe you're just ahead of the curve and looking to get some tips ahead of the next round or the next year. All are welcome. Hopefully, the session will be very useful for you. Is my screen showing up okay, Stone?
Yep, your screen's showing up well. And then I've also just gone ahead and thrown our Leland profiles in the chat to make it easier to copy paste them. We'll also have some other stuff later about that.
Yeah. Well, should we get started in a minute or two, Stone?
Yeah, I'm happy to give people a minute.
Yeah. If you want to post in the chat where you're tuning in from, we'd love to hear that because apparently we have a very international group here. As mentioned, we're both in London, which means we're actually on a different time zone to a lot of our fellow coaches on Leland who are all in the States, which means, I at least definitely have a lot of clients from Asia and from Europe that we have just like a better overlap with. So if you're from anywhere exciting, feel free to share.
Also, just in terms of if anybody has any questions, feel free to raise your hand. We will have a Q&A at the end, though. So if it's something that is, very relevant to what we're talking about in the moment, or if there's like something you can't hear, then obviously, raise your hand then. But otherwise, we'll do our best to get to everybody in the Q&A as well.
Saudi Arabia, what's up? Toronto, very cool. Being in London right now, definitely very jealous of anyone who's somewhere warmer. It is horrible. Oh, that
Wow.
may have been. Was that a question or was that an accidental unmute? Pakistan, India, LA, but from London. Nice. We also both
Wow.
lived in LA together. Canada.
Anyone
Oh,
from LATAM or from Australia trying to, just round out all of the continents?
all right. I think we're at 5 minutes past, so
Yeah, let's
why
get
don't we
into it.
kick off? So in case you've just filtered in, I'm Victoria or Vika,
And I'm Stone.
and we are two friends who met during our Stanford MBAs. And we actually both live in London now. It's been 5 years, and I've been a Leland coach for about 2 years, almost coming up to 2 years. And Stone has joined me, finally accepted my imprecations to join and become a coach himself too. And so we decided to do the session together to help you guys get ready for your MBA interviews. So we're going to be covering a few pieces through the course of today's call. I think we have a full hour, right? But we'll try and get through our slides a lot faster than that because we want to give you guys the opportunity to do some Q&A as well. Before we get into the interview specific content, wanted to give ourselves a chance to introduce ourselves as well. I'm Victoria. As mentioned, I've been on Leland for coming up to 2 years later this year. Most of my experience has been in startups and sort of Silicon Valley AI, that kind of neck of the woods. Although I now find myself working on the investor side at Octopus, which is a really big British company, working on supporting the startups in our portfolio. I have an MBA, obviously, from Stanford. I got a pretty sweet tuition ride. Welcome to ask questions about that later if you like. And I have a degree in English literature from Cambridge. And some of my clients have got into these schools in the last sort of few months. So just thought I'd pull those out to celebrate them.
Okay, awesome. And then, yeah, as mentioned earlier, yep, GSB 2021, 2022, same as Vica. And just a bit about me, as Vica mentioned, I'm a bit newer to the platform. I have helped people outside of the platform get into, most of the top schools, Harvard, Stanford, Wharton, et cetera. I've also served on AdCom committees as an alumni interviewer for Stanford as well as for Brown, both for undergrad. So I've been on that side of things. And I've also been very involved with MBA hiring, both in my first job in consulting, as well as in my current job working in the video game industry. Similar to Vica, also managed to get myself a bit of a scholarship from Stanford, not 80%, but still pretty good. So yeah, happy to chat about that later if anybody has any questions. Oh, okay. Vica's already mentioning that.
I'm just responding to stuff in the chat. If we don't get to your answers in the chat, then flag it to us, or we can pick them up later as well. Okay, so we're going to start with the interview basics. So what should you expect once you have been invited to an interview? There is quite a lot of variation actually by school, but at the highest level, it's going to be held with one of either alumni, current students, or AdCom of the school. You should find out which one it is, and that should be available online. Because the strategy kind of for how you go into it will vary depending on who's interviewing you. There's a different approach that we recommend for alumni, current students versus for AdCom, and the approach for interviewing you is going to be quite different as well. The interview length varies, and sometimes, by within a school, it could be a very predictable set sort of time frame that they give you. Sometimes it's really up to the interviewer. The alumni interviews in particular tend to really range from 20, 30 minutes to like an hour and a half. Try not to read too much into how long your interview is. I can speak from client experience that a shorter interview does not mean that they've decided one way or another necessarily. Sometimes it really is just a product of the interviewer's time as well. And the format also varies significantly, can be live, can be virtual, can be a strong preference for one or the other. But generally, I advise my clients to always go for live if you can. Think about where you present better. Obviously, if you feel like you're going to be a lot, so if you're very nervous and you think having some notes up on a second screen might help you, then maybe you might choose to opt for virtual. But in general, live just gives you such a better opportunity to share who you are and pass the kind of personality test, which we'll get into later as well. Stone, do you want to take the second one? Sorry, I can't remember who was doing the slides.
Oh, I thought you were going to take this slide and then I'll take the next one. So keep going.
I thought, all right. I thought, okay. Sorry, we haven't rehearsed this. Format. We will get into a lot of this in a second, but you can pretty reliably expect that there'll be questions from your resume, your background, and your story. And behavioral questions, which are like, tell me a time when, or what would you do, or how do you think about X and Y? We'll have a ton of examples coming up, so don't worry. There are some notable exceptions to sort of this rubric. HBS is infamous for having a pretty interrogative style. Again, I will go into this in a little more detail later. Wharton is known for group interviews. So it's a format where you have 6 people in one interview and you're asked to sort of complete a group task together. LBS, I actually don't know what the exception there is, but different schools
in here. So LBS has a very strange interview. It's generally around 2 hours long. And what they do is they start off with a case. So they'll give you generally 5 minutes or so to prepare. They'll often even walk out of the room, and then you'll have 5 minutes to present, and then maybe 2 to 3 minutes of Q&A afterwards.
Great. And then in terms of your chances, this is something that a lot of people usually ask as soon as they start working with us, like, what are my odds? Again, unfortunately, it varies. You'll actually find out more from like GMAT Club, etc., and online forums about this. But in the case of GSB, it's about 50% once you have the interview. And then but then for other schools, it could be 3 or 4. I think for HBS, it's something like 1 in 6. And Kellogg interviews everyone. So again, just don't set too much stock behind that. Yeah. And then going into the general things that your interviewer is looking for, I'll hand over to Stone.
Okay. Yeah. So I'll be talking a bit about some of the things that your interviewer is looking for. Some of these are things that they will tell you overtly, and some of them are things that they may not mention, but that may be sort of like implicit or subconscious thoughts that they have. And before I get into this, though, there was just a question on whether it's a case study presentation. So Mary, for that, if you have more questions, feel free to reach out to me separately and we can discuss. But yeah, just going back to this, though, in terms of what your interviewer is evaluating, first thing and one of the most important is, of course, your story and what do you want to do after your MBA? How does your school fit? How does the school that you're interviewing at fit into this? And is this something that's achievable? And this is going to be answered in the first generally 2 or 3 questions that they'll ask you. So make sure that you have a good response here. Kind of leads into that idea of school fit, where some of that is obviously around some of the offerings and the skills of it, but it's also around the general types of personalities that these schools look for. Of course, there's always going to be a spectrum, but they will skew in certain directions. For example, GSB, and I know there's a lot of GSB interviews happening right now. So many of you may be interested in this, but they're very interested in people who are willing to be vulnerable, who are, very self-reflective. And that's something that's more important at Stanford than it might be at, some other schools. Then, again, going back to sort of like general things would be those soft skills. So some of this is your communication style. Can you speak directly and concisely? Can you speak in a compelling way? Then, there's just like other questions that they'll have around how do you work with other people? Do people listen to you? Can you influence them? And these are kind of in the soft skills. This is a lot of what you'll see in type of behavioral questions. Then this is something that I think is really important is a growth mindset. So this is basically showing that you actually want to be improving yourself. And this is really important and gets its own bucket, because if you don't want to be improving yourself, then why are you spending so much money and so much time getting an MBA? And, we'll talk more about this in some of the future slides as well. And then finally, there's this idea of like personal quality. So it's basically just like, are you someone who the interviewer would want to be friends with, would want in, class with them, would want to be, stuck in an airport or in an elevator with them? And, the important thing here is just to come across as like a normal, friendly, real person and not just a robot. And yeah, that's it from this. I think Vica has the next slides.
Harsh but fair. I've actually genuinely sat on the hiring side interviewing people and had like a question that's just airport, question mark, yes or no at the bottom of my grip sheet. So do not underestimate that one. We're now going to run through the common questions that you might expect in an interview. So the big ones, and this is like, if you're very limited on time, if you have a very short attention span, this is the one to just practice and prep for and think about. The whys, the big questions, and then just like your story bank as well, which we'll deep dive more in the next following slides. So first of all, you will always be starting an interview with a request for an introduction. So tell me about yourself or walk me through your resume. That the difference between those two questions is quite important in my opinion. Tell me about yourself is asking for a bit more of a holistic, you're sitting in a circle with a bunch of people you don't know. How do you introduce yourself to them? Where have you come from? What very high level, where have you worked? What are you interested in? What are you planning to do with your career, etc. Walk me through your resume is actually asking you to walk through the resume, i.e., chronologically, starting at college. Do not go beyond. Do not go earlier than college. They don't need to know about your high school choices. Why did you pick the degree you did, and then why did you choose the internships or work experience that you did? Critically, like why did you leave this place and that place? You can kind of mention it at a high level there, and land sort of in the present moment. Ideally, linking it a little bit to why you're here, like applying for the school and your career goals as well. Um, the big no here is to spend 5 minutes answering this question, so make sure you practice it to be a minute, maximum 90 seconds long. Ideally no more than that, unless they've given you like a take 5 minutes kind of prompt, but try and keep it high level. Keep all your questions short, answers short, because remember, you don't have to squeeze everything in. They can ask you follow-ups and they will ask you follow-ups, so it's not like you only get one opportunity to talk about each thing. You want to make sure it feels like a conversation and not like a monologue being delivered one directionally. Secondly, your goals. I mean, hopefully by the point of interview, you've already thought hard about your goals, and they'll be part of the reason why you got the interviews, how you articulated them. So just making sure that you can talk about what they are and why they are your goals. Be ambitious. It's honestly, especially for non-Americans, I would say be arrogant. Like really push yourself to be someone that they want to, you are a rocket ship that's going to achieve this destination. And this school gets the privilege of sticking their logo onto the side of your rocket ship. That's the mentality you should be carrying. Like you should be presenting as an inspiring, ambitious, likely to succeed individual, especially for the top schools. So the pitch goes both ways. Why MBA? This one's important and people really scoot over it a lot. A bad answer is because business school is going to give me a great network and teach me loads of useful stuff about business, and I will get to work at XYZ after. No, like think about it as a formula. You, i.e., your background, your profile, everything that you already have, plus the MBA should be the formula to you succeeding in these goals, right? So like, what is it specifically? If you're a consulting background and you want to be a founder, you're going to use business school in order to practice being a founder, to use the entrepreneurial resources, to meet your investors and co-founders. If you're pivoting into finance, you're going to be using the finance curriculum. You're going to be working with the finance professors. You're going to be interning at companies that recruit from business school heavily, etc. Like make sure the reasons are very specific and fit into this formula neatly and are not generic or feel like GPT-3 might have written them. Why the school, similarly, specific, unique, concrete, actually makes sense for you and your journey, not generic. This school is known for its great placement rate of people into finance. Like, yeah, great. Like they know that, but like why? Like be a little deeper, show what you're going to use that the school offers. And, it's kind of a double click into YMBA really. The specific resources that the school offers that you've researched or ideally heard about from classmates or alumni. Always good to mention that you have done your work and spoken to people, and use this question to sort of show that off. And then finally, the resume deep dive. Very important is that you are ready to talk about any bullet point in your resume. Not many interviewers or schools will be mean enough to pick out a bullet point and be like, tell me about this one, but HBS might. And you in my interview for Stanford for GSB, I was asked to sort of pick a bullet point myself from my resume and talk about it as a project that I was proud of. So just be ready to explain sort of what you did, why you did it, and go through the story. And we'll have some frameworks to help you with that coming up.
Yeah, so as Vica mentioned, basically every single one of those questions, you can, I would say 99% chance that they are going to show up. And then the next couple slides I'm going to walk you through are sort of the common behavioral questions. These are kind of grouped into categories where there's multiple ways that they may ask the same question. And again, these are the most common ones. There's always going to be curveballs, so make sure that you're ready. But what I'll be doing with each of these is talking through the category and then also saying what the interviewer is looking for here, because some of them are obvious, but sometimes they aren't. So just to start off with, going above and beyond. This is something where basically they want to see that you're actually doing more than your job, that you're trying to grow, that you're open to new experiences, that you can learn, that you can exceed, and that people almost like look to you to exceed. And I would say with this one, it's it's really interesting to see what people say, because you get a range of some people saying, oh, like I don't know, like I was really fast in Excel and I got really good at that. And then you have other people who will talk about mentoring other people, and or like starting up a new initiative within their company. And I would say that the latter ones like that, where you are actually affecting change and where you are helping people, those are the ones that are much more poignant. So definitely, if you can, try to focus on those. But yeah, and then the next category is leadership. So it's like one of the big things that people go to an MBA for is to work on their leadership skills. So having some leadership experience is really important, because they want to see as well, as well as like how you lead and like how you influence others. They also want to see, like, in a classroom when you're discussing this stuff, are you going to have something to contribute? Is this something that some of your classmates can learn from you about? So definitely a really, really important topic. Same with collaboration, another one where it's like you're going to be collaborating a lot with your classmates. You're going to be collaborating a lot, after business school as well. So, they're going to want to, hear about this. And I would say with this, there's sort of two things that they're looking for. It's either that you can work with a wide range of people, personalities, different functions. So, maybe a good example here would be if you were in the finance department and then you were, you were working with people in marketing, you're working with people in engineering, you're working with people in art, all to, like create something that, wouldn't have been possible without that collaboration. That's something great to, bring up. And then the other thing from a collaboration perspective that they want to learn about is how you resolve conflict. So basically that you are willing to have difficult conversations, you're willing to and able to see someone else's perspective and find common ground and, have the difficult conversation and work around it, rather than, maybe just like ratting them out to their boss, or, just like being passive aggressive, because there's a lot of people like that. And that's not really the profile that they're looking for at an MBA program. Next one here, feedback and growth. This was something that I mentioned, in the context of Stanford, but I think is something that's very important to most business schools, around how you can basically, like, how do you try to improve yourself? Do you proactively look for feedback? Do you can you actually address it, etc.? And I would say the best way that you can answer this question as well is to talk about this, and then talk about a time when you took this feedback and you applied it outside of that specific context, because that really shows that you internalized the feedback and that you grew from it. And again, if we're trying to figure out who is going to be the best people for this limited number of slots at this school, they want people who are actually going to make the most of their time in business school, and who are going to grow, who are going to get feedback, etc. Next slide, please. Okay. A few more common topics here. So self-awareness, this is generally asked in the context of what are your strengths and weaknesses, maybe like what motivates you. So, this is something where they want to understand, can you actually talk about this and, talk about how you grew, kind of pursuant to the last thing I mentioned around feedback. And it's also something where sometimes, especially if you have an admissions committee member, they'll have read through your entire profile, including, the comments that your recommenders made about you. So if you say, for example, oh, my best strength is my communication, and then your recommender says, oh, Stone needs to work on his communication because he's terrible at it, then that's not a great thing to have happen. And I would also just say for weaknesses, please don't give a puffball answer like, oh, I work too hard, or oh, people like me too much and I get distracted at work. Like they want someone who is actually trying to grow. So like take a chance, show some vulnerability and talk about something difficult. Like for example, I talked about how when I talked about like feedback and growth and failure, I talked about a time when I was almost kicked off of a project when I was working in consulting because the client didn't think that I was actually adding any value, and how I grew from that. And yeah, so going on from there, failure, tell me about a time when you failed. Again, this is that same thing of just like this aspect of wanting to be able to grow from your mistakes, admit to your faults, etc. Then a couple more topics. So mentorship. Basically, do people actually value your mentorship? Can you talk about times when you've helped people grow? This doesn't need to be in an official capacity or in anything, coaching related, but it's like if you are, I don't know, it's like maybe you were the onboarding buddy for somebody and, they just started the job and they had all these questions. Or, it's like I see someone asking about 2+2. So it's like maybe you're a current student and you are a math tutor, things like that, where it's like you're going out of your way to help people. And this is also really important for business school because so much of it is, are you able to help your classmates? Because you're supposed to be able to learn from each other, not just from your professors. And if people are looking to you already in your current job as someone to learn from, then there's a decent chance that you'll have something good to help your classmates out with. And last one here is around conflict. This is, kind of similar to what I was talking about earlier with the idea of, communication and collaboration, but sometimes they specifically ask for something around, conflict. And basically it's just like looking at how you address it, not just with people who are, your peers, but also people who are maybe above you. Sometimes they may ask you to, talk about a time when you had to change someone's mind, etc. So, again, it's just talk about open communication, talk about, finding common ground, talk about having difficult conversations and what you learn from it. Well, that's it for this slide. So I think Vika is going to talk a bit next about preparation.
Yes. So, preparing for the actual interview. I'm going to talk about a couple of frameworks that I use that I swear by with my clients. One is maybe one you're familiar with already, but should never be underestimated, the power of the STAR framework for telling stories. So this is for those tell me a time when questions or behavioral questions. STAR stands for situation, task, action, result. And basically, it sounds very simple, but if you miss any one of these four parts when you're telling a story to someone who's never heard it before, you are not going to be giving them what they need to understand everything about the story that they need to, and to take from it what you want them to. Without setting up the situation, i.e. the context, I was working with a FTSE 500 client on a deal in the US. Without something like that in place, which a lot of people miss because they're so familiar with the stories themselves that you just kind of assume, you just forget to like contextualize it. The listener is not going to be following the size of the deal, your role in it, like what's actually going on. Without explaining clearly what the task or the challenge or the objective was that you were faced with, they're not going to know or be able to really evaluate how you did in terms of meeting that task's requirements or exceeding the expectations placed upon you. Action. The way that a lot of people miss out on this one is they talk about the we. Like, we decided we then worked on, my manager told me to, like, the action has to be your action, because this story is ultimately about you and showcasing something, some quality that they've asked for with the question. So what did you do, perhaps, and very likely in pursuit of the larger, team objective or team goal, but what is it specifically? Like, what are the action verbs? What going back to sort of what Stone was talking about previously, how did you go outside of your job duties in order to help address this challenge or task? And finally, what was the result of that action? Again, you can't just say the project was successful, the deal closed. Obviously, you probably, as an early career consultant or whatever we're talking about in this case, probably you are not wholly and personally responsible for that deal closing, right? But what your action did was contribute to it. And so be clear about that contribution. And then you can obviously talk about the kind of the project success as well, but make sure the result is linked to your specific action as well. So the way I get clients to prepare for this or for Tell Me a Time When questions in general, is to generate a story bank of about 6 or 7 stories. And then write them all down using this framework with like 1 or 3 sentences for each part. Make sure you don't miss any part when you're practicing it, and then just practice, right? Like, just make sure, like, if you practice enough times, then you will have the starry sky in mind as you are challenged with this question and interview. And trust me, it's actually better to say things like, the situation was, my task was, the action, like, it's better to over framework than it is to ignore the framework, because it's so hard to follow someone who isn't following something like this as they answer a story time question. And then I have the offense and defense decks, which is something that I got from a Stanford professor who also became my biggest investor in my startup. And one way to think about these frameworks is it's your anti-freeze cheat sheet, i.e. how, if you freeze up in the interview and you don't know what to say, this will help you figure out what to steer back to, and it will give you a kind of backbone. So it's something that's helpful to memorize or, prepare heavily, basically. I don't want to say the word memorize. I think memorizing is bad for interviews, but it's very good prep. Your offense deck is basically you reverse engineering what the interviewer is going to write down about you after they finish reading your application. If you didn't go straight into the no pile, then what they'll do is they'll write down 5 or 6 sentences about you, because they need to shorthand you versus other applicants as they defend your case, basically, to get you further along the process. So that this applies in the application. This also applies in the interview. Each stage, you are giving them evidence towards a summary version and a write-up of the interview in this case, right? What is it that you want them to write? Write those things, and then think about giving evidence against those points as you're answering the questions. So if you freeze up, your offense deck will have steer for like what, for 80% of questions, what you can talk about to make sure that they write down the things you want them to write down about you and take away the conclusions that you want them to take away. The defense deck, most useful for HBS, is what are they going to have drawn a red circle around as they prepared for your interview. Most interviewers will have just your resume. Other schools will have given them your whole application. HBS will have gone through your application and red circled some things, and they'll be challenging you about those things in the interview. Think about what those things are, because even if the interviewer themselves did not put a red circle around that, the person who read your application definitely did. And the interview is just one data point from a series of data points that will ultimately lead to an answer. So the interviewer might say yes, but you might still get a no. The interviewer might say, oh, I'm not sure, but the rest of the application was so good that you might still get a yes. If they say hard no, you're probably not getting in, but there's some wiggle room around outside of that. So get ahead of those questions by practicing what you'll say if they ask you about that long career gap, that low GMAT, that weirdly short stint in some big bank that you maybe got ejected from, whatever it might be. And try also to perhaps inject some of those things into your offense deck, because like I said, even if the interviewer doesn't ask you about it, it can help to get on the front foot. E.g., if your GMAT quant was a little low, if you talk about a story where you worked on a really difficult quantitative project, as long as it's relevant to the question you were asked, then your interviewer is going to write down, he seems like he's really, really good at quant tasks, potentially, right? Like that's like a somewhat abstract example, but it can help to turn these negatives into positives and think about them as a positive thing that you want to deliver.
So now I'll be talking a bit about dealing with nerves for interviews. And I think a lot of these work for MBA interviews. They also work just for interviews in general. Just a bit of background on them. Basically, I used to be a semi-professional musician, and I had really bad performance nerves, and I developed this toolkit for how I could perform without, making mistakes, losing my memory, etc. And I found that a lot of them really helped me as I was interviewing for, corporate or, just like business school type things as well. So I will go through them now. As you are preparing for your interview, basically, what you want to do is two things. So essentially, you want to make sure that you kind of want to just like mimic uh, all of the actual experiences that you'll be having in the interview, and then you also just want to make it a bit difficult for yourself. And I'll go into these with a bit more detail. So for so basically for mimicking the actual experience, what you want to do is you want to just make it so that when you get into the interview, your body is just like, oh, I've been here before. I know what I'm doing. So some of the things that I recommend are, if you can, practice at the actual interview location. So like if you're going to meet at a coffee shop, just like go there some random time, ideally the same time of day, and just like practice them with a friend or practice them on your own. Then wear the clothes you're going to wear so that you feel comfortable, especially like if you aren't used to wearing a suit and tie and you have to do that for an interview, then it's like you're going to feel like someone's kind of choking you, and that's not fun. um, and same thing with mimicking the physical sensations, and this is something that requires a bit of reflection, but basically what I would recommend doing here is thinking about the last time when you were in an interview and you got nervous. What did your body do? So for some people, it's like their heart rate goes up really fast. Or other people, they get too hot or too cold, or maybe their throat chokes up. And basically, what you want to do is try to find ways of mimicking those sensations. So, for example, if your throat does choke up, one thing you can do is drink ice water, just like a lot of ice water, right before practicing answering your questions. And that will kind of give you a similar sensation. So then, that you can do it when your body is nervous. And then that way, if you get nervous, you'll be fine. And if you don't get nervous, it's even better. On the other side of things with making it difficult for yourself. So some of the things here are basically like do interviews where you record yourself and then force yourself to watch it. Do things where you are maybe walking around or something, just like, having a bit more cognitive load. And also do full run throughs where you aren't stopping when you make a mistake. Because in the actual interview, you're not going to be able to say, oh, sorry, I forgot what I was going to say. Let me start from the beginning. So you just need to practice that resilience. Next slide, please. Okay, and on the interview day, here are a few tips that I have, and I'll go into each of them one by one. So breathing exercise. Basically, what you want to do here is calm yourself down. So there's a couple of breathing exercises that I like to recommend. You can even just like try them beforehand so that you can practice them. And these actually have like some level of like scientific evidence that shows that they help to calm you down. So just really good. The first one is stomach breathing. So what you do here is just stick your hand on your stomach and just practice breathing in and out, but breathe in a way where your stomach kind of pops out, not your chest popping out. Because when you breathe through your chest, it causes more adrenaline, and that's going to make you talk too fast. It's going to make you nervous, etc. But if you breathe through your stomach, it actually calms you down. Another one, kind of on this vein, and you can combine them, is called box breathing. So what you do here is you breathe in for a certain number of seconds, let's just say 3 seconds. Then you hold your breath for 3 seconds. Then you breathe out for 3 seconds. And then you hold that, outward breath for another 3 seconds. And you can do this 10 times. And then this will, it'll really calm you down. Even like do the counting in your head. It will get you out of your head. It'll get you away from the nerves. Another thing to do is eat a banana. This has two benefits. One is that it'll give you a bit of energy. The second one is that it'll give you a bit of a potassium boost, which actually is also scientifically shown to, improve your nerves. Yes, they do. Yeah, and then third one, drink warm water. And again, warm because you don't want to drink cold water. It's going to constrict your throat. And you don't want to drink hot water because then you could burn your tongue or burn your throat. But drink warm water. It will help to open your throat. And then that will not only relax you, it'll also make it so that when you speak, you have a fuller voice that's going to make you sound a bit more confident. Next one here is power poses. So these are basically things where it's like you basically do something that your body would do to make yourself more confident. So one of them is like basically it's like standing with your arms on your hips, like chest out, etc. And you hold that, like you just like do it in the bathroom if you want. Hold it for 30 seconds. It's gonna feel a little bit weird, but it actually like makes your body and makes your brain feel a bit more confident. It's weird science. Next thing to do is embrace the nerves. So tell yourself why you're having these nerves. And the reason you're having these nerves is because you're about to do something really important and your body is trying to summon up extra energy in order to help you. And understanding that actually has like really good benefits. They've done scientific studies that have shown that students who are told in advance of an exam that they're having these nerves because their body is giving them the energy so that they can think quickly to answer the questions did statistically significantly better than those who weren't given any guidance whatsoever. And then the last one here that I'll say is when in doubt, smile. And there's two reasons for that. One is that it will calm your body down and it'll make you feel more comfortable, even if you're faking it. Obviously, don't do like a weird smile, like, ooh, but like, just try to do like a natural smile. And then the other thing is that smiling will help you make a better connection with your interviewer. And then they'll likely be more friendly, which will then make you calmer. And it'll also just make them feel a little bit better about you, better chance that they'll give you a good recommendation afterwards.
Thanks, Stone. All right, final slide, and then we'll go to Q&A. So final things, and these are really things perhaps to skim through right before you're about to meet your interviewer. Be concise. Do not let yourself ramble. It's so tempting and it's so commonly done, but anything more than a minute, maybe 90 seconds is starting to feel like a monologue. If you pause, you may well be able to continue, but you want to pause and give the interviewer a chance to respond, reflect, re-steer you, ask a question, etc. If you do find yourself rambling, as I used to do all the time, just remind yourself what the question is, repeat the question and say, so going back to my strengths, and then that gives you like a milestone and a way to sort of pull yourself back and actually make sure you've answered the question in like a final sentence, rather than just getting lost and kind of tailing off or just continuing to, ramble. Again, I was very guilty of that earlier in my career, so no judgment here. Secondly, this sounds so obvious, but again, this comes up so often. Answer the question. The problem with preparing too much is that you're going to be so tempted to hear one word that you think means that this story is going to be appropriate to this question, and then just go off on one and prepare and share your carefully prepared story or answer. The most important thing is to answer the question you're being asked. The interviewer is going to feel a bit like frustrated, maybe even insulted, if you just kind of ignore what they're asking and just go off on what you want to talk about. So the key here, which has really worked for me myself, is listen to the question. Do not jump in straight away. Pause, reflect. If you need to, ask, can I just confirm what you mean? you're asking for a leadership story. Would you prefer that I tell you one from work or one from extracurriculars where I was able to lead a larger group than I was at work? Something like that. Giving the interviewer optionality really helps make that feel interactive and really make sure that you are answering exactly what they're looking for. And then tailor your answer to that question clearly. Again, bring it back, repeat the question at the end, do a concluding sort of sentence or two. All of those are great ways to make sure you really address the question, because there's nothing worse than them saying, okay, that's all great, but what I was actually asking was ... And finally, we've touched upon this already, be human. More than anything else, you've usually already got through most of the like tick box exercise things if you have an interview. So what they're checking here is that you're human, that you're nice, that you're approachable, especially for business school. Like the most important thing is that you're going to deliver value to your classmates, i.e., you're going to be someone that gets involved on campus, that is interesting, that is nice to speak to, nice to sit next to. You're not going to go and shut yourself off in your room and study 90 hours a week. You are going to, help lift your classmates up, because ultimately what you're doing by going to business school is buying into a network. So make sure that you're coming across natural, easy, just try and treat it like a conversation between friends rather than like the most difficult job interview you've ever done. It should be closer to the friends sort of, maybe formal friends, maybe like not quite sure if you're going to be friends yet or not, but definitely a lot more sort of social and relaxed than an interview for JPM on a super round or something. Sorry, JPM is JP Morgan. So those are the final tips we have to share, and we have about 12 minutes for Q&A. So we're going to leave our QR codes up here, so you can find our profiles if you're interested in learning more, booking an intro call, spending some time one-on-one. We've also both issued discount codes for our hourly or packages services. So if you want to help our help to prepare for an interview or your application or anything else, you can also use these codes to book some time with us at a discount, basically. So with that, we will open up the floor. Please put your hand up or just unmute yourself and jump in, and we'll keep an eye on the chat as well and see if there's anything that we haven't answered.
Yeah, while you all think of this, I know there was one question earlier, and then there was just a question on like the Wharton TBD, so we can talk a bit about those. The first question was, could you elaborate more on the conflict bit? What's an ideal way to authentically showcase you're good with conflict resolution without making yourself or a colleague sound immature, especially if that was the case in such an example? So what I would say here is that when you're talking about how you resolve the conflict, it can be really good to say that you talked to the other person and you understood and like you tried to learn where they were coming from. And you can even like give a one sentence explanation. For example, you could say, oh, when I was talking to, the marketing manager about this disagreement, I actually realized that there was something that I didn't understand about the way that we run campaigns, and that that was really important for the marketing team to make sure that we run the campaigns in the same way. And after speaking with them, I learned this, so then I was able to so then we were able to figure out a way that worked for both of our teams, or something like that, where it's like you're not saying, oh, this person was being immature or this person was being bad at their job or a bad communicator. It was that there are always naturally going to be things that people don't understand about other people's work, their backgrounds, etc. And it's just that you are showing an interest in that person and their perspectives, and you show a willingness to listen. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thanks so much, Stone. Just like a quick follow-up question to that. Do you think it's best to steer clear of, let's say, like more examples that have to do inherently with like people, um, you know, bringing up conflict just because there's like organizational politics? So just completely steer away from that and use kind of more, I think action-oriented or like job-oriented examples.
I think that you can use examples that have organizational politics. What I would recommend doing there is if you can talk about how you learn to navigate it in a way that satisfied everyone, then I think that that can be okay because that is something that's going to happen. And you can even say, it's like we all have to deal with organizational politics, and it's something that I'm, very aware of, and this is how I personally went about it or something. So you don't need to avoid it. I think you just need to uh, say it in a way that shows that it's something that that you have to deal with, and that it's not just that this person in particular was a terrible person for like dealing with that stuff or for like engaging in that stuff.
Got it. Thank you so much.
Sareem, I think that was a hand up, or it was just like a high five in the chat. Let me know if you have a question, or let us know.
Hello, I do have a question. First of all, great job today from both of you. My question is like, how much does your past work experience matter, especially when comparing candidates from middle market firms to those from bulge bracket firms like Goldman or JP Morgan? And if that's the case, then how can someone who have experience from a smaller firm or company can stand out in their application?
Mm. Happy to give us a crack first. So I definitely fell into that category. I had one work experience before applying for Stanford, and that was my consulting job, but it was not McKinsey, Bain, or BCG. It was a boutique called OC&C, not well known at all outside of the UK. And yeah, I mean, worked for me. So there's clearly definitely a path, even if you're not in a big name brand background company. It's going to come down to what like what did you how did you obviously like how did you do in that company, but also most importantly sort of how do you talk about the projects you were involved in and the decisions that you made. Can you show some signals that they recognized your value, that you were stretching beyond your tenure? I for myself was not promoted, like had not been promoted when I was applying, so I couldn't point to a promotion, but I could point to a project where I had stepped in for the associate partner for like 3 weeks while she took some unexpected time off. So that probably helped my less than target consulting background appear a lot more impressive than it probably did on paper. And in my interview, we spent a lot of time drilling into, at one point he was drawing an org structure of a case that I had been on to understand sort of who was I managing, what did I step into exactly, like what was the shape of the team and my role in it, because I think what they're really trying to do is weed out people who kind of hide behind their team's achievements or who sort of claim to have had a manager level influence when actually, it was the managers making those decisions. All of us exaggerate a little bit in our resume. All of us will have, a feeling like what we wrote down is probably sugarcoating a little bit what actually happened. But there's an art to explaining, justifying, and being, honest, but not too honest kind of in interview. And that's the kind of stuff that I think coaching and practice, especially with people who have done this kind of interview before, will really help you get to. Anything to add, Stone, or should we move on?
I think we can move on. I just posted something in the chat.
Great.
I know there was a question earlier about the Wharton team-based discussion. I can just spend 2 minutes on that. Basically, what they'll do is they will stick you in a room with a few other applicants, and they will give you some type of non-technical project to work through together. One example could be you are all Wharton students, and you need to organize a welcome event for your classmates during orientation week. How would you go about doing it? So it's just like things that don't actually require any sort of business expertise, because it's not a prerequisite to have that when you're applying. It's more so that then they can evaluate how do you collaborate with other people? Do people listen when you talk? Do you interrupt people, etc.? And basically what I would recommend for that stuff is just like make sure that you are participating somewhere in the middle where you're not the only one talking, but you're also not talking. Try to yes and what other people are saying, and if possible, offer to, take time, or like be the note taker or something like that, so that you are participating in multiple ways. Well, and then I know there was a question here on, Vica just answered Rashi's question. Unless
Yeah,
you
sorry,
want.
I just started typing because I know we're running out of time. I think we did touch upon the common mistakes. Stone, do you have any other ideas for questions to ask the interviewers besides like when it's an alumnus, asking them about their own experience in an open-ended way? Because the best I
Yeah.
have there is like something that shows that you're goal-oriented and considering different ways to your goal, but curious if you have something to add there as well.
Yeah, so what I would say is definitely keep it focused on their experience in business school and not just random stuff about their resume. Also, if you're asking something niche about their past, make sure that you tie it to why it's actually important to you, and not just a random question. So let's say, for example, that like that Vica were my interviewer, and I asked her a question about startups and how business school prepared her for that. What I might say is, like, as I mentioned earlier, I want to do a startup. I want to work in a startup after business school. Given that was your, experience as well, what were some of the key skills that you gained, rather than just saying what were the key skills that you gained from a startup? Because then, if the interviewer, it's like, if the interviewer wasn't paying attention, then they may just wonder why you're asking something like that. That's a bit of an extreme example, but I think it still sort of carries where it's important to explain almost like why you're asking certain questions. Some other general questions that I like to ask are things like, what was something that surprised you about business school that you only learned once you were a student? Because then, it's like you're not asking about something that you could have just looked up on a website. Another one, especially for people who are a bit further along in their careers afterwards, is to ask them, like, what skills from your business school, from your time at business school are most useful in the, sort of few years after business school? And then how did that change, once you got to becoming a more seasoned executive? That way it's like you show a bit of a, forward-looking mentality as well. Let's see. There's a lot of questions still coming in. I know we're running up on time. Yeah, and as Vica had mentioned, please feel free to reach out with any questions. We both have put our profiles here. We also have QR codes that link to some of the interview packages that we offer. I'm just going to post our links again in case you have more questions and want to reach out. So yeah, thank you everyone for your attention and for all of the great questions. And thank you, Vica, as well, for answering a lot of these in the chat.
No worries. I'm a super fast typer, but a really bad multitasker. So I just kind of turned off my ears while I was listening, while I was answering in chat. I didn't miss anything critical. Yeah, thank you guys so much. We had fun. Hopefully you learned a lot. And if you want to get the slide pack or anything, then make a Leland account if you don't have one already and message us. And I'm sure we'd be happy to share that to anyone that reaches out. We'd love to know more about you and your journey as well, and where you're at, and any questions you have. And yeah, I guess that's it. Thank you so much for the feedback. If you have any tips for the next time we do this, please let us know as well. We will hopefully be doing more events in the future. And best of luck with your journeys.